Welcome to NFL Nexus. You know, every single offseason, there are a handful of teams that find themselves at a truly pivotal moment, a real fork in the road. And right now, you can't find a better example of that than the Indianapolis Colts. They are staring down one of the most fascinating and honestly franchise-altering crossroads in the entire league. It's this high-stakes balancing act. On one side, you have a key architect of their offense, a coach who's been absolutely vital, and he's getting poached by other teams. That threatens to just rip a hole in their offensive continuity. But on the other side, a truly game-changing elite defender has hit the market. The kind of guy who can single-handedly turn your biggest weakness into an absolute terror for opponents. It's the classic risk versus reward dilemma. And believe me, the path they choose here isn't just going to define their 2026 season, it could very well set the entire course for this franchise for the next 5 years.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we're going to set the stage and really talk about why this offseason feels so critical for the Colts. Then we'll dive into the big challenge on offense, who they're about to lose, and what that departure really means for them. After that, we'll flip over to the massive opportunity on defense, this potential fix that could just elevate the whole unit. From there, we got to talk about the money, right? We'll get into the nitty-gritty of how they could even afford a move like this, because top-tier talent is never cheap. And then finally, we'll wrap it all up and ask the big question, is this one move enough to make them real contenders?
You know, it's crazy to think back, but for a huge part of the 2025 season, the Colts looked like the real deal. I mean, they were being talked about as legitimate Super Bowl contenders. Through those first 10 weeks, they were just firing on all cylinders. The offense looked creative, it was humming, and the defense was making big plays. They were beating good football teams. But then the bottom just completely fell out. They had this absolutely brutal collapse in the second half of the season, losing 5 of their last 7 games. All of a sudden, the offense got stale and predictable, the defense couldn't get a stop to save their lives, and all that Super Bowl buzz just vanished. It left this really sour taste and exposed some very, very serious cracks in the foundation. And that has put their general manager, Chris Ballard, in a spot where every single decision he makes this offseason feels like it's under a microscope, because he knows just how close they were, and frankly, how quickly it all fell apart.
And that really brings us to the heart of what we're talking about today. How does a team that just completely melted down the stretch, how do they fix that? How do they get back on track and actually take that next step towards being a true contender? Now, that's a tough enough question on its own. But how in the world do you do it when you're also about to lose a critical piece of your coaching staff, the guy who is literally in your young quarterback's ear calling the plays? It's a monumental challenge for sure. But as we're about to see, it also opens the door for a massive, if kind of risky, opportunity.
All right, let's start with the first major problem the Colts have to solve, and it is a big one. The very likely departure of their offensive coordinator, Jim Bob Cooter. In the NFL, you hear it all the time, but it's true. Coaching continuity is king. It's especially true when you have a young, developing quarterback. Having a consistent system year after year lets players master the playbook instead of having to learn a whole new language every offseason. But right now, it looks like the Colts are about to lose a huge piece of that stability, and the brain drain from their offensive staff is really just getting started. Now, what's so telling here is just how fast this has all escalated. You can see the progression. This isn't just a team doing their due diligence. Cooter went from a preliminary virtual interview with the Eagles to a full-blown in-person interview. That second step, that's a massive signal of serious interest. Teams do not fly candidates across the country and spend a whole day with them unless they are on the absolute shortlist for the job. And then, just as that news is making the rounds, boom, the New York Giants jump in and request an interview of their own. He's not just a candidate anymore, he's a hot commodity, and this sequence shows his market is heating up, and it's heating up fast.
And look, this isn't just speculation or some rumor from a fan blog. This is coming from one of the most plugged-in national reporters out there, Jeremy Fowler at ESPN. When a guy like that confirms an in-person interview, you take it to the bank. Think about it. That's a huge commitment of time and resources from the Eagles front office compared to just a quick phone call. It tells us Cooter isn't just one of many names being considered. He is a legitimate finalist for a really high-profile job with a team that was in the Super Bowl just a couple of years ago and is desperate to fix their own offensive issues.
And it's not just the Eagles. As if their serious interest wasn't enough to make Colts fans nervous, Peter Schrager from NFL Network confirms the Giants want a piece of the action too. This is so crucial because it creates a competitive market. When you have multiple teams, especially 2 big-name franchises in the NFC East chasing your coordinator, the writing is almost always on the wall. It drives up the potential salary, it increases the prestige of the job, and it makes it incredibly difficult for the original team to keep him. The odds of Jim Bob Cooter being back in Indianapolis next season, they are shrinking by the hour.
So why do we care?
What's the big deal? Well, this isn't just about swapping out one coach for another. For a team whose entire future is built around a talented young quarterback, changing the offensive coordinator is like a seismic event. It could mean changing the entire offensive philosophy, the terminology the quarterback has spent years mastering, the rhythm and feel of the play calling, everything. It's a massive disruption that can stall or, even worse, set back a young quarterback's development. And that development is the single most important variable for the Colts' success. It just throws the entire offense's chemistry into question right at the moment when they need stability more than ever.
So yeah, the offense is facing some really serious foundational questions. But while that storm cloud is brewing over the offensive side of the building, this incredible opportunity has popped up on the horizon. I'm talking about a rare chance to fix the team's single biggest weakness from last season and add a truly elite, game-wrecking talent to the defense. This is the kind of move that doesn't just plug a hole. It can change the entire identity of your defensive unit.
Let's be crystal clear about the problem that just plagued the Colts all of last season. For all the things they did well, their 2025 season was constantly undermined by a pass rush that, frankly, just couldn't get the job done consistently. They couldn't generate pressure on opposing quarterbacks, giving these guys all day to sit back in the pocket and pick the secondary apart. That puts an unbelievable amount of strain on the entire defense. It forces your cornerbacks to cover for 5, 6, 7 seconds, which is nearly impossible in today's NFL, and it makes it so hard to get off the field on third down. It was, without a doubt, their Achilles heel.
And that brings us to the potential solution, Trey Hendrickson. And let me be clear, we're not just talking about a good player here. This guy is a certified blue-chip superstar. He's a 4-time Pro Bowler who just consistently lives in the opponent's backfield and blows up everything they're trying to do. He's not just a guy you bring in on third down. He's an every-down force of nature. In fact, Pro Football Focus doesn't just have him ranked as a top pass rusher. They have him ranked as the single best free agent available this offseason, period, at any position.
This quote from PFF really tells the whole story of his dominance. Let this sink in for a second. Even in a season where he was banged up, playing through injuries, Hendrickson was still the 6th best edge rusher in the entire league, according to their grades. That is just absurd. It speaks to his incredible talent, his technique, his motor, and this isn't some flash in the pan. The quote notes he has now put up 5 straight seasons of these elite-level grades. That is the literal definition of consistent, reliable dominance at one of the most important positions in football. And if you're a visual person, this chart just lays out the insane impact he could have. Just look at these numbers. In only 7 games, while hurt, mind you, Hendrickson's production was basically on par with what the Colts' top free agent defensive ends gave them over an entire 17-game season. He essentially matched their output in less than half the time. He gets to the quarterback and finishes plays at a rate that is just on another planet from what Indianapolis has on the roster right now. The gap in production isn't just a gap, it is a canyon. This is the difference between having a decent pass rush and having a dominant one. And if you're still not totally convinced of just how elite Hendrickson's peak performance is, just look at this stat. This puts him in the absolute rarest of company. Only he and the Steelers' TJ Watt, a future Hall of Famer, have multiple seasons with 17 or more sacks among this group of absolute monsters, all of whom are perennial Defensive Player of the Year candidates. He has more of those ridiculously productive seasons than Myles Garrett and Nick Bosa combined, and even a unicorn like Micah Parsons hasn't hit that number yet. This isn't just an upgrade. This is the kind of player that single-handedly changes the entire geometry of a defense.
Okay, so a player this good, a guy who puts up those kinds of video game numbers, is obviously going to be very, very expensive. In the NFL, you pay an absolute premium for guys who can disrupt the quarterback. And that leads us to the inevitable, multi-million-dollar question. Can the Colts, a team that does have other needs and has to be careful with the salary cap, actually afford to sign a player of Trey Hendrickson's caliber? So let's break down the numbers and see what it would really take.
So here's our starting point. This is the baseline for all of their offseason spending. According to the trusted folks over at Over the Cap, the Colts are walking into free agency with just under $27 million in available salary cap space. Now, in the grand scheme of the league, that's a pretty healthy number. It's enough to be a serious player for some key free agents, but it is not an infinite war chest. It doesn't allow you to just go sign whoever you want without some serious financial gymnastics.
And here's the projected cost of greatness. Pro Football Focus, which does some really deep contract analysis, estimates that Hendrickson is going to command a deal worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $21 million per year. As you can see, that is a massive chunk of change. Signing him would immediately eat up the vast majority of that $27 million in cap space they have, leaving them with very little financial wiggle room to address their other roster holes, sign their upcoming draft class, or have an emergency fund for any in-season injuries. This slide right here lays out the financial puzzle.
the strategic tightrope that Chris Ballard has to walk perfectly. The problem is simple. Signing Hendrickson leaves you pretty much cash-strapped and inflexible. But there is a potential, and I have to stress, very difficult solution on the table. The thinking is that the front office could choose to move on from their #1 wide receiver, Michael Pittman Jr. That move alone would free up another $24 million in cap space. It would give them all the financial firepower they need to sign Hendrickson and still have plenty of money left over to fill other needs. But this represents the absolute core of the dilemma. It means creating a massive hole on offense to fix a massive hole on defense.
So let's bring it all together now. When you really boil it down, this entire incredibly important offseason for the Indianapolis Colts seems to hinge on this one massive strategic choice. It's a calculated risk on one side of the ball versus a potential grand slam, game-changing home run on the other. This is exactly the kind of decision that gets general managers either a fat contract extension or a pink slip.
So it all comes down to this. The challenge is right there in front of them. Offensive instability is looming with the very likely departure of Jim Bob Cooter, creating a ton of uncertainty for their young quarterback. But the opportunity is equally massive, a rare chance to make the entire defense truly elite by adding a dominant force like Trey Hendrickson. This creates the ultimate dilemma for the front office. Do you rob Peter to pay Paul? Do you risk weakening your offense by losing not just your coordinator, but maybe your top receiver too, all to supercharge your defense? And the stakes just couldn't be higher for a team that knows its window to win with this talented young core is right now.
And all of that leaves us with this final, thought-provoking question. In a league that is so heavily dominated by elite quarterback play and high-powered offenses, can a team with big question marks on that side of the ball, a new coordinator, maybe a new #1 receiver, can they truly become a title contender by making one dominant, transformative move on defense? It's the multi-million-dollar question the Colts front office has to answer, and there is no easy answer. What do you think they should do? Should they go all in and pay Hendrickson no matter the cost, or should they focus on securing the offense first? Let us know what your game plan would be down in the comments below. If you found this explainer helpful, be sure to subscribe to NFL Nexus for more deep dives into the biggest stories around the league. And hey, don't forget to like this video, it really does help the channel out a ton. Also, you can help support the channel by purchasing our coloring books. They're perfect for children, grandchildren, and even adults. You can find them through the link in the description or by using the QR code you see on your screen now. Thanks for watching.